In this demo, I'm going to show you how to use data template selectors to dynamically select an appropriate data template based on some property of the data-bound objects. To do this, I'm first going to need to define a data template selector, which is nothing more than a class. So I'm going to add a class here called product template selector. I'm going to flesh it out here by inheriting from the data template selector class and overriding the select template method on that base class, which you can see returns a data template. It takes in two arguments, the first of which is the data-bound object that's being rendered through a binding. The second is the element on which the binding is attached to. From there, your logic can figure out, however it needs to, how to come up with a data template. Now, the implementation I'm showing here is a simple reusable version where I know that I'm going to be using this for products. So I can go ahead and cast the data-bound object to a product object. Likewise, I can cast the container to a framework element. As long as both of those casts succeeded, this template selector must be hooked up in the place I expect it to be. If not, I can just punt here and return null. But as long as I got that far, then I can go and invoke some logic to figure out what data template to use based on the product that I'm seeing. Now, the simple logic I have wired up here is that a product has a type property on it, and that type is going to be pizza, salad, or drink in our ZA data examples. If I just concatenate template onto the end of that and assume that out in the current resource dictionary for the element that this binding is on, there is a data template named that template, then I can locate it with a find resource and just return that. Now, obviously, you could have whatever convoluted logic you want here. You could new up a data template from scratch and dynamically populate its elements from programmatic code. Generally, you're going to want to declare these in XAML and locate them as a resource, as I'm doing here, through some kind of naming convention. Now we need to go ahead and hook this up to our data-bound context. So what I'm going to do is go out to a view I created in a previous demo called Data Template Selectors View, and I'm going to add in a resources section that creates an instance of my product template selector, and I'll need a local namespace up above. Now that I have an instance of that selector available, I can use it in a data-bound context. So I'm going to replace my text box down here with a list box. We'll bind the item source of that list box to products, and we'll set a property called item template selector pointing through a static resource to the instance of our product template selector. Now we just need to get these products from somewhere, so I'm going to wire that up in a view model for this view. So if I go to the data template selectors view model and replace that class with something similar to what we've seen before, we have a products collection exposed. We only populate that products collection from the database if we're not in design mode, and it raises property change events when it gets set. So now how is that view model getting hooked up to our view? Well, if you remember from the implicit data templates demo, it's being automatically associated through the data templates out in the main window. So remember, we had this data template selector view model, implicit data template, rendering out the data template selectors view, which will set its data context to the instance of the view model. So the only thing we have left to do is define the data templates that are going to be rendered out by our product template selector. So if we add into our resources section here 3 data templates, one called pizza template, one called salad template, and one called drink template, the type property on the product is going to be salad, drink, or pizza, and we concatenate that template name onto it inside of our product template selector. Each of these is just going to render out a simple representation of a pizza, salad, or drink. So by setting that item template selector, it will invoke our data template selector, and we can run, go to the data template selectors view, and there you can see the pizzas look like that, the salads look like that, and the drinks look like that. So by defining your own data template selector, overriding the select template, and invoking whatever logic is needed inside your data template selector, you can dynamically return whatever data template is needed for your scenario.